What is art?
Art is any creative expression of yourself. So it could be a painting, it could be a piece of music, it could be an improvisation, it could be something that you speak, a poem or literature can be art. I think sometimes people joke about like modern art. Well, is it art? Anyone could have done that. But I think it's really important to recognize that that person did it at that time, and that's what makes it art. They said this is art, and so we have to respect that.
Yeah, and so in that light, art kind of changes throughout time.
Absolutely.
And how do you see, in particular, flute changing throughout time?
The flute has changed a lot, partly just because of the nature of the instrument. I mean, originally the flute was sort of like the recorder. And then in the Baroque period, we started having the transverse flute, which looks like what we play now and is held horizontally, but it was wood or made of bone. Then they added keys, and now the flute is made out of precious metals like silver or gold or platinum. So the sound of the flute and its capabilities have changed dramatically. We're able to play far more notes. We're able to play louder and softer than they were before. We can play different colors that the original flutes maybe couldn't get. They could get different colors. We can get different colors now. The ability of flutists has changed dramatically from an instrument that didn't have any keys. They couldn't play as quickly. Now flutists can play incredibly virtuosically. We can play very, very fast, play very slowly because of our developed lung capacity. So flute playing and its abilities, the range of styles that we can play has changed dramatically.
What do you think art in general means?
There's a really fantastic commencement address that's fairly well known now. It was given by, I believe, the dean at Boston Conservatory a few years ago. And he talks about how art must be one of the essential parts of society because in times of great strife, in the Holocaust, musicians in concentration camps were writing fantastic music. You know, Messiaen wrote the Quartet for the End of Time in a concentration camp, and in a place where, you know, you're worried about your survival, your like day-to-day existence. There's still this need, this compelling need to make art. So it's something that's really essential to our humanity and our existence as people. I don't think we could really live without it. And there is art that is from the very earliest time that we know that there were people on the planet, and we're still discovering, you know, ancient cave paintings that are amazing. But if you had to spend most of your time hunting and trying to find somewhere to stay warm, why would you make art unless it was really something that you felt compelled to do? You couldn't live without having something like that.
How do you think it impacts individuals?
I think it's a way for us to process emotions that maybe we don't have words to use. I think a lot of people turn to music at many different times. You know, we have music on when we want to have a party. We turn music on. When we are feeling really sad, we might turn some music on. When we're really excited about something, there's music that we associate with that. And I think that's true for many people, and even people that don't play music. They might have a popular song that they listen to in those situations.
So for practice routines for beginners, are there any things that you suggest?
Well, in the very beginning, especially with playing the flute, we have to get used to finding the right spots on our face. It's not very intuitive at first. So I always recommend to my students that in the first few weeks, maybe the first 2 weeks while you're learning to make a sound, until you can do it every time right when you pick up the flute, your main priority when you're practicing is just doing that maybe 5 times a day for just a few minutes each time. You're getting your head joint, you're practicing just making a sound. And then the longer that you study, the longer it's going to take you to practice. So now I've been playing the flute for more than half of my life. I've always practiced between 3 and 4 hours a day. And sometimes when I'm preparing for something that's a really big performance or it's an important audition, I will practice between 6 and 8 hours a day. But for someone who's in school and your main job is being a student, maybe you'll need to practice half an hour a day at first, and then as you get to harder and harder music, or you need to do more skills, you're doing more scales, more technique work, you're doing more practicing of your sound, and you're also playing more difficult music, then you're going to need to practice at least 45 minutes every day, or maybe an hour each day. It also really depends what your goals are as a musician. If you want to be a professional musician, then you need to practice as much as you possibly can every day, because that's what it takes to be a really really accomplished musician. But if you want to play casually and you want to enjoy your school band, then I think an hour a day is plenty of practice, as long as you're using your time efficiently.
Was there a moment in time where you realized, I can play the flute, I am now an artist, and it's gone from just having to go through these exercises, and I finally feel somewhat accomplished?
I would say with any instrument, I don't know anyone who feels like they have really mastered music. I think music is something that you can study until you die. You continue working on it, you continue trying to improve your skills. That said, there are amazing musicians that are still, they're still honing their craft. And I still feel like there's so much more that I can learn, and there's so much more I could be able to do on my instrument. But when I finished my master's and I started teaching full time, when I wasn't just having a couple students, I was teaching during the week all the time, I started to realize, like, wow, I really know a lot about this flute thing. Like, I am an expert at this, which is a really great feeling to have this, you really self-recognition of all of your knowledge. I think it's easier for other people to see who's an expert at something or recognize that someone's really accomplished, and it's harder when we work so consistently and so, like, with so much perseverance at one skill for so long. We get very caught up in the things that we're not good at, and it's hard to take a step back and recognize, like, oh, I actually am really good at many of these skills, even though I'm still working towards, the nebulous perfection that maybe doesn't exist, but we're always striving for.